From a very young age, we are programmed to seek approval. Do you remember the time you did something right in front of your parents and saw that satisfied smile on their faces? That taught us to depend on external reactions. And, without realizing it, we carry this pattern into adulthood, always trying to please, even those we don't know. Nowadays, everything seems to revolve around the social validation factor. We are constantly encouraged to display ourselves in the eyes of others, which has caused a legion of people to feel stuck, disconnected from their own dreams. How many times have we postponed our desires simply to avoid the judgment of others? Of course, to some extent, worrying about what others think is normal. It helps us live harmoniously in society. But when that concern turns into an obsession, it's a different story. Hours upon hours are spent thinking about what people think of us. It also wastes much of our energy, preventing us from living life to the fullest. According to Richard Taylor, the philosopher behind the book Restoring Pride, most of us worry too much about what others think. We've developed an irrational fear of criticism and rejection. This fear drives us to abandon paths that align with our talents and desires, choosing instead to live according to what someone else expects of us. The irony is that this validation we crave is tied to the most external things. Our job titles, possessions, appearance, the clothes we wear, or the status of the people we associate with. It all boils down to looking successful, not being genuinely happy. We lose control of our emotions the moment we place our happiness in the hands of others. We feel on top of the world when praised, but a single criticism can send us into a bottomless pit. This is even more evident on social media. How many people do things just for likes, comments, and shares? They make others' approval the foundation of their happiness, forgetting that half the people they're trying to impress are complete strangers. And now the tragedy. A British study revealed that people spend an average of 6.5 years of their lives worrying, mainly about what others think. Simple things like appearance, clothing, or even body odor consume an inordinate amount of time and energy. Without such concerns, we could be years ahead in living life more lightly and meaningfully. The authors of The Courage to be Disliked, Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, argue that the key to happiness lies in not depending on others' approval. They believe that true freedom begins the moment you become open to the idea of being disliked. Sounds harsh, right? But it makes sense. The authors note that most people confuse approval with happiness. They think they need others' approval to be good or happy. But it never works that way. We give up our freedom if we live on those terms. Life ceases to be ours and becomes about living up to others' expectations. That's why they emphasize that the courage to be happy requires the courage to be disliked. This becomes the turning point. Not caring about others' judgments regarding what we do and who we are allows us to feel light and authentic. But let's be honest, it's hard not to care about what one person thinks. Now imagine not caring about what a group of people or an audience thinks. In such moments, the need for approval becomes social. Who among us hasn't felt nervous during a presentation, worried about making a mistake or being criticized? This shuts us off from our best and truest possibilities, and that same fear keeps us conformist, always stuck to what is safe and sanctioned. But what if the secret to overcoming it was confronting the fear head-on? In ancient times, the Stoics, among other philosophers, were notorious for performing voluntary acts of ridicule. Strange, isn't it? Let's break this down a bit further. Take, for instance, the Roman senator Cato the Younger, a Stoic. He deliberately avoided conforming to the latest trends and dressed simply regardless of the disapproval it sparked. According to Plutarch, Cato wasn't acting out of vanity, but was training himself to feel shame only for things that truly deserved it. He wanted to desensitize himself to the value of others' opinions on trivial matters. A similar anecdote involves Diogenes the Cynic, who lived in the 4th century BCE. He regularly challenged social norms almost daily. A classic example is when he walked back into theaters while everyone else was leaving. When people mocked him, he responded, "Aren't you ashamed to walk the wrong path in life and then laugh at me for walking backward?" Diogenes took things to another level. He had achieved an incredible degree of freedom, completely detached from the need for others' validation. "Most people laugh at you," someone once said to him, "exactly as donkeys laugh at them." "I don't care about donkeys, and I don't care about them," he calmly replied. With such an attitude, he wasn't just free from the burden of others' opinions, he also earned their admiration. Even Alexander the Great famously said, "If I weren't Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." These acts of defiance weren't merely stunts to stand out or appear peculiar. They had a deeper purpose, studying human nature and testing their own limits. Friedrich Nietzsche referred to this as psychological observation. By enduring others' disapproval, we learn not only about them, but also about our own capacity to resist social pressure. And here's the most wonderful part. Such exercises teach us that others' judgments carry very little weight. Arthur Schopenhauer, for example, would say that when we encounter something cruel or foolish in another person, we should view it with the detached curiosity of a miner stumbling upon an unusual rock. It's not something to take personally, but rather to observe and learn from. Now let's get practical. A crucial question is, do the people whose approval we seek even deserve our concern? Think about it. Are they independent, critical thinkers, or are they mere conformists, parroting what they hear? Was Seneca right? How foolish is the man who takes pleasure in being praised by those he himself cannot praise? Does it make sense to value the opinions of those we do not admire? People's reactions to you often say more about them than they do about you. Hostility, indifference, or, at worst, sadness toward what you do, or even just your presence, is rarely personal. These acts may reflect unconscious aspects of these individuals, facets of themselves they don't even realize exist. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung referred to this as projection. He believed that we all tend to repress the traits we dislike in ourselves into our unconscious. In Jungian terms, this hidden side is what he called the shadow, and it tends to emerge when we see in others the very things we don't want to acknowledge in ourselves. For instance, when something about a person really bothers us, it's often rooted in a characteristic we possess ourselves. Psychology. Today describes projection as an unconscious mechanism. Simply put, when someone can't cope with their internal feelings or impulses, they project them onto someone else. This allows them to deal with those emotions indirectly, without realizing the problems are actually their own. As Jung famously said, projections turn the world into a replica of one's own unknown face. It means that everyone views the world through the lens of their unconscious mind, and this is precisely why we cannot allow ourselves to be defined by others. Once we understand this, we start to see that criticisms and judgments are rarely about us at all. Want a new way to handle this better? Try an ancient philosophical practice: voluntary exposure to ridicule or rejection. It might sound strange, but it teaches a profound lesson. If someone disapproves of us, the world doesn't collapse. When we're at peace with ourselves, no criticism can truly harm us. Over time, insults and judgments from others begin to feel like empty words. They enter one ear and leave through the other. You realize you don't need to live for others. And then something magical happens. You start listening to your inner self and acting accordingly. The strongest antidote to worrying about what others think is self-confidence. When we feel insecure or plagued by feelings of inferiority, we make others' approval a necessity and live in fear of their disapproval. But when we strengthen our mind, body, character, and sense of purpose, the opinions of others lose their weight. They simply stop mattering. The truth is, no matter what you do, you will never please everyone, but you can be entirely good. Accepting this reality and having the courage to live by it is the real secret to happiness. So why not cast aside the need for approval and embrace the courage to be disapproved of? Ultimately, it's not what others think of you that matters, it's what you think of yourself.